Hello, everybody. I join you today with what I hope is going to be a fairly short lecture on genre. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Um, and hopefully, this goes smoothly. So, it's week 3. I want to talk about genre. And the reason I want to talk about genre is because I want to look at the way that we use different literature and different modes of writing in order to convey meaning. So that's what the goal is for today. So that's what we're going to do. So, first of all, what is genre? So, when you think of genre, most people think of the traditional version of genre, which is um, how do you categorize something? Such as if you're looking at movies, you might have horror or romance or comedy or drama. And those are all types of um, genre that you use to sort um, different movies into different sort of categories. It makes it easier for you to find what you want. So that's what traditional genre is about, is being able to easily find something that you want to find based on various tropes. So if you think about maybe sci-fi as a genre, what kinds of things does sci-fi have? It has things like spaceships or maybe time travel, aliens. It's in outer space, so maybe when you think about traditional genre, you think about what makes up a certain category, and then you slot things into different categories. Um, on the other hand, there's contemporary genre theory, which is a different thing. Contemporary genre is sort of about looking at who your audience is and trying to figure out what's the best way to communicate with that audience. So it's about communication, audience, and sort of about accessibility. So, what is the best way to um, teach or get through to this person? What's the best way to communicate? So, I had a couple questions out here. Why is genre important? Why does it matter? Um, to answer that, I think that genre is important because it means that you can communicate with somebody and that you've identified um, how the best way is to communicate with somebody. Um, and communication is very important. I don't think I really have to explain that, but the audience is key. Um, so figuring out who the audience is for various literature or um, other types of writing is depends on how you're going to communicate that. So you use different types of language for different situations. So, what is a discourse community? How do discourse communities dictate use of language? So, a discourse community is a certain type of community, like it can be any community. Basically, a discourse community is something that uses a different form of language in order to communicate from other discourse communities. So, for example, a discourse community could be the classroom. It could be English 120. English 120 is a discourse community. Or it could be your basketball team. That's a different discourse community. Or it could be like you're in D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, and you like playing that. So that's a different discourse community. And in each of these discourse communities, you use a different type of language in order to communicate. Um, so, for example, if you were playing basketball, you would use a different type of language than if you were playing D&D. Um, because if you think about it, um, you're talking about a different thing, a different experience, and that dictates your use of language. Um, so I basically answered those two questions for you. Now, I want to talk about theory. Everybody has heard the word theory, but what is theory actually? Like, what? do you think theory is supposed to do, and what is the point of having theory at all? So, when I think about theory, I think of theory like a building. Theory is basically a set of rules that dictates the way something functions. So, when I think of theory, I sort of visualize it because it's easier to do it that way, is in a three-dimensional format. So, I pretend like I'm building a house. Like, I have the foundations of that theory, and then there's different new types of theories that make up the walls, and then maybe there's a roof, um, and you have all these different theorists and theories that sort of make up a community, a discourse community in academia, if you're thinking about it that way. So, that's one way that you can sort of think of theory, is that it's sort of an experience that is three-dimensional and is about different types of rules for how things function. So, theory is a set of rules or guidelines, a system of ideas used to define aspects of a general principle. So, for example, there's different types of literary theory, like post-colonial theory, or feminist theory, gender theory. There's all these types of theories out there. And they each have a different type of rule or guideline in order to um, dictate what's happening uh, in that discourse community. And then when you have theory, it sort of like is a way of trying to figure out ontology, which is sort of a way of being, a way of existing. So you can sort of figure out and theorize different ways of existing, different ways of teaching and learning, and different ways of knowledge making. I'll explain a little bit about this later in a different presentation. So, genre theory, contemporary genre theory, the rules of genre theory are these. There is no one correct or true way of speaking English. So, that is one way that you can sort of dictate how to speak English in different discourse communities, is that there is no one way. There is no like true English or normal English. There is formal English, which is a different type of discourse community. So, formal English is when you're sort of like writing for maybe academia or for law, which is sort of like when you use different types of language for those types of discourse communities. You wouldn't speak formal English if you were just talking to friends. You would speak what's called colloquial English, which is different. For those of you who don't know what colloquial means, it means that it's sort of used in um, sort of different discourse communities, um, and it's not as formal, it's informal English, and is sort of uses different types of words and jargon in order to get the point across. So that's one thing. So if anybody ever tells you that you're not speaking English correctly, you can point them to contemporary genre theory to tell them that they're wrong. Um, English adapts itself to the situation in order to be considered appropriate. So if you're thinking about those discourse communities again, you have English that's adapted for the classroom, for different types of settings. Like if you're back in the basketball court, you would definitely use a different type of English than if you were like writing an email to a professor. Um, Contemporary genre theory is about function and purpose. So it's about finding the clearest way to communicate in various situations. So that can include things like code switching. Code switching is when you sort of um, take um, one sort of language and like you switch into a different type of language easily back and forth. So that can include different actual languages like French and English or French and Japanese or something like that. Or it can be between discourse communities. So that's one way of looking at it. So that's genre theory. Those are the rules or like ways that you can sort of see that theory is built. Um, So those are the foundations of genre theory. So if I was in a classroom right now, I would ask you to form a group and write two different emails. Um, you don't have to, you wouldn't have had to send them to me, but the first email you would write is an email to me asking me for an extension using the wrong type of language for the situation. So this can be informal English or jargony English or whatever you want to use. And the second one would be the same email except in the correct language for the situation. So those are ways that you can practice sort of applying theory and genre to your writing. So thank you for listening. I hope you are um, having a good day, and I'm gonna stop sharing that now. So that's genre theory and application of different types of theory. So thank you for listening um, and meeting.